All right, welcome back to the channel. Well, welcome if you're new. Hopefully you had a Merry Christmas and you're looking forward to the New Year as much as I am. It's actually New Year's Eve at the time of this recording, and I think most of us can agree 2020 wasn't all that great for different reasons, but I think we're all on board with that at least. Anyhow, I'm sure next year will be better, and I am hoping that I'll be bringing a better deck into the next year. So what I've done with Zur is actually, after reading the comments in the last video, it was pointed out to me that someone had mentioned that they didn't think that Gilded Lotus and Thran Dynamo and Zur were necessarily all that great. In Brea, the thought is that, often you're going to be playing your commander and replaying it because you frequently end up sacrificing the commander in order to get it back in the command zone so you can re-trigger the Thopter creation so that you can sacrifice the commander again. And so Brea really wants to have those big mana artifacts in the high end because they represent 1 to 2 additional casts of Brea per artifact. And of course, they're excellent anytime you get them into play, but the deal is how you're curving out and what you're trying to do exactly with your deck. And the thought was that basically in Zur, you're not really, like, what you're trying to do is actually hit a 2 mana artifact and play Zur on turn 3, tapped out. And then on turn 4, from there, you don't really, it doesn't matter if you get a Dynamo and a Lotus and stuff, because you're planning to Necro, and once you Necro, you want a lot of cheap cards. You don't necessarily want the big setup cards. So the pacing of the game is a little bit off for Zur with those. That was a comment anyway. Summarized, I kind of like extrapolated from what they were saying. And I think that they were probably right. So I decided to try cutting those 2 cards as much as I love them. And I actually replaced them with cards that kind of fit the Zur game plan a little bit better, I think. So those 2 cards are Gitaxian Probe and Mental Misstep. The reason I think they fit the Zur game plan a little better is that Probe just gives you free information to see if the way is clear so you can tap out for Zur, and Mental Misstep counters the most frequent ways that your opponent's going to be able to solve a Zur. They're either going to Swords to Plowshares it, or they're going to like Vampiric Tutor or Mystical Tutor or Enlightened Tutor and go get a solution. And so Mental Misstep, actually, normally you don't counter tutors, but in that case, you certainly would. You're tapped out with the Zur, they cast a end of turn Vampiric or Mystical Tutor. And you're highly likely to, if it's a Vampiric, you're probably going to counter. If it's a Mystical, you might let it go under the assumption that they're getting Plowshares and then counter that. But I think it actually makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to try it out, and basically I ran through some games with the deck like this, but it does take quite a few to really feel it out. Now, I will say this: it does make Mishra's Workshop weaker in this build, but I think that's probably okay because it's still very strong. And realize, of course, that this deck actually runs way more signets. Like there are no signet. There's an Arcane Signet, but no Azorius and Dimer in Thought Vessel. Basically, in the 2-drop slots, Zur's a little bit heavier. So even though we cut a few artifacts, we actually aren't that much lower in artifact count. Now, I don't recall if I had Mox Opal in the last build or not, but it is a card that probably belongs in the deck, even though you don't have the free Thopters with Brea to, you could like play your commander and then play Mox Opal with Brea, and it's just on. But it's okay because often in the deck, realizing that you would be sacrificing 2 Thopters or Brea or whatever, typically you're only +1 artifact in that scenario anyway. And what I'm getting at is this Mox Opal is just so good, especially in a deck that runs Jeweled Lotus, like because you can get these really sick starts with it. In fact, you can get a turn 1 Zur that it does belong in the deck. So plus it's a Winter Orb deck, and 0 casting cost artifacts that produce mana of any color under a Winter Orb are good. So anyway, I have some great games for you. I'm going to run through these. We'll get started, and hopefully you will enjoy watching these because I very much enjoyed the challenge of playing them. I'm going to do last 7. Where were we? 12:30. Basically, it is the 31st, but only by a few minutes. So I'll just run through the full gamut of the 12:30s. Not every game was competitive. However, there were a couple in here that were real competitive, and I think you're going to have fun seeing both the competitive and non-competitive decks, just because it's interesting, you know. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Hopefully, I thought I was getting started. Okay, so against a chroma here, obviously, like seeing this right now, this is like some kitty deck or something. Now I have changed based on recommendations again from y'all. I have changed my comments so that when I create a game, it now says this: see EDH videos, and it has a link to YouTube. And so it should be clear to anybody that this is literally a CEDH game that they're going to jump in. Um, Basically, my assumption is that if that isn't clear enough that it's going to be CEDH game, then they're probably not analyzing enough that when we play, it wouldn't matter anyway. So that's my guess, unless they just don't see it. I mean, that happens too. So anyway, I had to mulligan quite a few times, and in fact, if you notice, I mulligan to 3 cards. So this is what I'm presented with on the mulligan to 3, going first. So I'm down 5 cards, but I decided to keep it, and I've been pausing so that you could figure out of the corner of your eye what you would do with this hand. I'll go ahead and let you know. So when you mulligan, sometimes I see people keep strip mine. I love the card. It's a great card. You want it in your opening hand. But when you mulligan, often keeping strip mine is completely foolish because they have so many more cards than you that trading a land for land is terrible. I couldn't even, if this is mulligan to 4, I would have kept the Mind Twist as the other card, just so you know. But I couldn't even afford to do that here because I had to keep. This actually represents potentially enough mana just with these 3 cards to cast Zur. If I can get 2 lands with the Zur, with the Tithe, then that means I have all 3 colors plus 2 mana. So I kept this because the only hope I have of recovering is to get my commander into play. And I'm hoping my opponent doesn't wasteland me, hoping they don't kill it, and a lot of other things. But I do top deck that Scalding Tarn, which combos real nice with Tithe. My opponent runs out turn 2 Lightning Greaves, and I get to do the old Tithe trick here: hold control, sack, cast Tithe in response to my own spell. And I decided to get Tundra Godless Shrine and a Watery Grave. And the reason I do that, you'd want to get 2 islands here because of Vedalken Shackles, but I do it this way because on the off chance that I top deck Necropotence, this actually gives me triple black as well. So I wanted to be able to cast that if it comes up. And sorry about the voice here. Anyhow, so I just run out Zur, and my opponent doesn't have an answer. So I run out Chase because I'm thinking that maybe 3 mana with boots, maybe this represents an Aven Mind Sensor. So I play the Jace so that pre-combat said I'm going to attack, and then if he flashes out the Aven and I don't have anything in the top 4, I'll just bounce it with Jace. And then, well, no, I won't just bounce it with Jace. I'll +2 Jace. And the reason is that then if I bounce it, then they can Lightning Greaves and attack back, right? But if I +2 Jace, then on their turn they would have to have enough. They would have to have a grand total of 5 power in order to attack and kill Jace. And if they don't, then on their turn, if they make a play, I can bounce it and attack and I win. And if they don't make a play, then I can just use Zur to block and then start zeroing Jace and not attack with Zur and treat him like a blocker. So fortunately, no Aven Mind Sensor here, so it's a real easy Necropotence here. Easiest Necro of my life, right? So I just plus Jace because drawing cards with Necropotence in play makes no sense at all. Necro will draw the cards, so take advantage of the other features that Jace has to offer. Excuse me, and I pass, and all of a sudden my mulligan to 3 is fixed, and the game is over. Opponent's doing literally nothing, so you know that's fine there. But we're gonna make that nothing much worse. I'm gonna go ahead and get Rest in Peace here, and set up for the kill. I only mainly got Rest in Peace. This was a mistake, actually. So the correct play for me was to Mind Twist them and then go get Rest in Peace and exile their graveyard. Because if they have a disenchant here, they're actually going to get to kill the Rest in Peace. However, given what I've seen from the opponent, which is a lot of nothing, and the fact that I have a Necro and a Mind Twist with a Force of Negation in hand and all this stuff that I have going on right now, Even if I can't combo kill them, so like if they disenchant the rip in response, um, then they're going to lose to Necro. Like this game's 100% over. So I was a little bit sloppy though. And so despite the fact that I won, my first game of the day was a little bit sloppy. And actually, that is something that happens with me. It usually takes a few games to like get in the right kind of mode to be like really on control autopilot. So, all right. So game two, MS Lano. That was a Yek Cool 88. So MS Lano here is playing nothing. Unfortunately, my opponent scoops. And you can see I tested out some other cards. I was thinking about one of the other comments somebody made was that they thought that the equipment package was pretty weak because you don't have the extra Thopters. And I own that it is a lot weaker. However, those two pieces of equipment in this deck are so good that I don't think they can get cut, and it's going to come up later, as a matter of fact. But you can see that my first thought of cutting the Guild Lotus was, well, I'll just put in one extra piece of equipment, the Better Skull, and then that way, if I get the Stoneforge, I can tutor up the Better Skull, use it as a wall that gains life, and draws fire to, somebody wants to kill that instead of, and then they don't have removal for Zur potentially. And also, it's something I can equip the other equipment onto. That was kind of the thinking, but I don't think it's necessary. Well, we'll see. Anyway, so the opponent sees Zur and quits. Volsung V9 here is the next game. I think that happens one or two times here. I can't remember exactly, but I do think that may have, yeah. Sadly, both in both cases, I had hands that they looked really interesting. Like this would have been a fun one to play out because first turn tutor for mana crypt, second turn crypt thought vessel, copy artifact perhaps. I don't know, if you copy the crypt, it's a little bit risky with all the flips, so it might not be great, but there's something here that looks pretty exciting, and I would have liked to have played it out. Anyway, so it doesn't happen, and we move on to Uncle Gord here. I promise there are some good games hiding in here, though. Okay, and I've got a nice keep against a Verena, Lich Queen, which it's a zombie wizard. It's a fun commander. It's not Zur, right? It's the same casting cost. It's bigger. It's just a million times worse. Anyway, we had a good nostalgia discussion though. He's an older player here from early like 2000s, I think he was saying. So very cool. The next card though, I'll mention it anyway. In the meantime, my hand is stacked, right? Like Soul Ring, Shackles, Force of Will, and Fierce Guardianship. This game's literally over. But anyway, my opponent runs out Zombie Master, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what a blast from the past. So Zombie Master was in the first deck I ever built when I played in a tournament. I actually built a zombie deck. It was black-red with, there was like a red creature that, it had like Sedge Troll and Zombie Master, and there was a creature that could turn your opponent's lands into swamps. There were enchantments that could do it, and a creature who could do it. And so I would try to like kind of mana screw them by giving them black when they didn't want it, and then swamp walking with my zombies. And that was my first tournament deck, which was it's quite a blast from the past here. But that was in 1995. 95. Yeah, I was Jesus, I was 18, and I hadn't been exposed to the magic of Brian Weissman quite yet. That actually happened when I was deployed to Korea, or not deployed, but assigned to Korea. I think it was like less than a year later. I was, it was 96, and the Duelist Duelist magazine #1 came out, and I had this article from some guy named Brian Weissman. Read the article, and he discussed the deck and how it worked. But more importantly, he actually he really put effort into going into, he discussed card advantage as he saw it, as a young Weissman saw it at the time. He was talking about things like single target effects, multi-target effects like Wrath of God, multi-card effects, Wrath of God, Brain Geyser, Mind Twist. He was talking about static effects like Winter Orb and Moat. But he was going into all these different. He had classified cards. He had discussed it. If you ever get a chance, check it out. It's really interesting to see the young mind of Brian. How pretty pretty on the spot he was. All things considered, the game was young. We were all pretty ignorant of a lot of things, and reading his article was just like this revolutionary thing for me. So, might not be revolutionary to you, but you might find an interest in it, and I'm certain you can probably look it up online and find it somewhere. Anyway, now we get into some more interesting games. So, Stoneforge Mystic here decided to batter themselves against the power of Zur, and the last one is also a particularly interesting game with Tatiova Benthic Druid. Now I was looking at this hand, and this hand is very risky. It has kind of a probably a dead draw somewhat. In green blue, you expect them to have regrowth effects and Snapcaster, so it's probably decent against this opponent, but still, it's not going to affect the board. And I have no colored mana at all, but I do have a top and 4 mana, and it's real hard to mulligan a Force of Will, a top and 4 mana, so I don't. And I run out Sensei's Divining Top, and I take a look, and it's not great. Yeah, there is a Godless Shrine on top of my deck that's going to sort of tease me with that Vindicate. I thought about forcing the bird here, but there was no guarantee that they didn't then lay a land. After I saw that they didn't have a land, sure, it was a little bit better, but... so I go ahead and just play the Rest in Peace here. Basically, I'm trying to draw bait. Now, when my opponent goes for Soul Ring, I do Force a Will it, and I Force Will it with Jace painfully because I'm two blue off, and obviously not having Gilded Lotus in the deck right here is pretty disappointing, but it is what it is. I do get to do this, though. I do get to Vindicate the bird, and that's pretty good. Opponent then runs out a Maze of Ith and uses the mana to play Fauna Shaman off of generated from Lotus Cobra. All right, so on my turn, I play Sensei's Divining Top, get my Opal turned back on here, and I just kind of set up. Opponent, now I'm going to pause the game here. I do have a energy field on top, which means I'll only take damage from Mana Crypt and like my Ancient Tomb, but I won't take damage from anything my opponent does until they get rid of either Energy Field or Rest in Peace. I'll be completely immune to damage. But I don't want to signal a reason for them to get rid of Rest in Peace. And also, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but there was another reason why I Force a Willed with Jace. And here it is. I'm holding a Fabricate. Fabricate, Helm, Rip. You don't actually have to play your commander. You don't have to Necro, and you don't have to control the board. Occasionally, and this was one of the things that Brian had pointed out to me when he had constructed the deck and after playing it for a while. Occasionally, you just get the pieces you need to instantly win the game, and you just steal the game, just like that. Pretty cool. All right, so, I got there, so we'll move into game 2 off of my 4 colorless hand. Top decking a Workshop. And we move into game 2, once again against Tatiova. This time I've got a pretty blazingly fast start with some disruption to go with it as well. So this is highly favorable to me. It has a Terramorphic Expanse, so I'm just going to run Copy Artifact down to the table and clone my Soul Ring. Opponent Wasteland's back. That's a little sketchy, but it can work if I don't have the right colors. And maybe that's what they're hoping, is that it buys them the time that I mostly just have colorless. So let's see if you... I'm going to pause. You see the owl? Probably not. Look, see, the beak. Anyway. All right. Anyway, I top deck Tezzeret the Seeker, but I'm going to go ahead and play Zur, and I'll make Tezzeret the follow-up. If my opponent had more tapped lands into play, like 3, I would have just slammed Winter Orb there and then did the Zur. But because I only had 2, and I would be, nerfing 3 on my lands and only 2 of theirs, it didn't seem great. And then just for good measure, my deck just coughs up. Also, I had Tezzeret, and once again, you don't have to get the. I mean, my deck coughs up Fierce Guardianship, so I know this is gonna run through safely. They don't have enough mana for Crows and Grip, and I now have a free counter spell. So I just slam Tezzeret, fetch for Helm, attack, rest in peace, win the game with counter magic backup. Still didn't have to get Necro. Kind of ridiculous. All right, but like I said, look, the hard thing about this deck, what's different about it with Breya is that you actually have to look for those. You have to look for those like, oh, hey, I can just win the game moments and take those wins. Because if you don't, you're giving your opponent more time to find their own situation in which you can't win, and you don't want to give them that kind of time. So it's a pretty brutal format. Anyway, game 3, opponents playing Tantiova, but so much fun. and I've screw up because my opponent's start is really good, and I kind of freak out a little bit. I don't want to say freak out, but I panic is the word. So what I needed to do here probably was tutor for Ancient Tomb. So I tutor for Ancient Tomb, right? Play Ancient Tomb, use Tomb to play Signet, put a mana into it with the Catacombs, play the Lotus, and then I've got 2 plus 3 is 5, cast my Commander, and I will have put 2, 3 mana, and I will have a total of 4 mana in play, and my Commander on board, minus a Lotus in hand. So that's a correct play here. That's what I should do. Alternately, I could tutor for, if I don't want to, I could tutor for Workshop and play like Coalition Relic, and then play Lotus, and then play Zur. But I actually think that's worse because Workshop in the future won't tap for, I mean, it'll play a Signet, and then after that it won't do anything. Whereas a Tomb is 2 mana for the next, the rest of the game basically, and unless I get down to 2. So that's a lot better. However, I actually do the worst option here. Well, one of the worst ones. The worst option is actually to go get mana Crypt here because you want to hit a land drop, and there's no reason to get a Crypt when you could get an Ancient Tomb. The Tomb is actually going to deal less damage to you over time, and it also isn't an artifact that you're already putting a bunch of artifacts into place, so they're already going to come after your artifacts. And then lastly, if you play the Crypt and no land, you've sent a signal to your opponent that your land, the situation is weak. And if you play the Ancient Tomb and use that to play the other cards, then you have disguised the fact that you actually had no mana in your hand. But me, I go get Workshop, and then I really screw the turn up. I'm still having trouble with the Lotus, I guess, because for some reason I was thinking 3 mana of any color, as in 3 mana, like of any combination of colors. It doesn't work that way. So, oops. You'd think a guy that used to own a Black Lotus would know how to play one, but it's been a while. I haven't owned a Lotus since 2000 and 2000. So anyway, the glory days. Anyhow, but I do get Zur down a turn late. My opponent now has a lot more mana and opportunity to deal with it. Springbloom Druid is exactly what Haro should have been always. Very good card that can't be punished. Comes with the body attached to it, but a little bit slower to make it a little bit more fair. Anyway, my opponent doesn't seem to have any interaction for Zur. However, they've conspicuously left blue and 2 up for most of this game. And one of the thoughts that was on my mind and should be on your mind when you see that is Hall Breacher. So I've actually been trying to work around Hall Breacher specifically, so I don't but of course, it wouldn't have made too much of a difference, but that has something to do with why I've kind of played out my turns the way that I did. Necro doesn't care about Hull Breacher at all, though, so Necro doesn't care about much. And of course, I snuck out that Thought Vessel. My opponent didn't contest it, and that right there means that, well, we get to do this. Somebody had mentioned taking out Thought Vessel because it's only producing colorless, or because they said Necropotence already wins the game. And while a Necro for 5 here probably wins the game, and it's true, like it almost certainly does win the game, it also gives my opponent time A necro for whatever that was, 15 or 19 or whatever, with all of the cards staying in my hand means the game is over, full stop, right? So I actually don't think that's not what happened there. What actually happened there is I let Seedborn Muse go, I Swords to Plowshare, and then I charged. And then on my turn, it looks like we're going to bug out. On my turn, I tutored up Helm, ran it out with like ton of mana and counter backup, and killed my opponent. Very straightforward. Sorry, I didn't realize this game was going to bug, but yeah. Anyway, so I guess my point is that this is one of those whoops combos where, like I said, Necro is good, but if you accidentally have Necro with an unlimited hand size, it's way beyond good. It's game over. It's GG. Necro is probably GG, but this is always. So that's kind of what we're really bugging out, locked up. Anyway, so I think it honestly it's just worthwhile, especially in a deck that's a combo deck, because like right there on the turn you're going off a lot of times, you want to have like Force of Will, Counter Spell, lots of artifact mana. Like sometimes what you have to do is you have to fabricate for Helm, play the Helm, activate the Helm. So now you're already talking about 8 mana, and if you have a Workshop, sure, that shaves 3 up, but it's still 5 mana. Plus you want to have a Force of Will, plus you want to have a Counter Spell. In order to do all that, you need a lot of cards, and that's one of the ways that you can do it there. So I don't believe that it makes any sense to cut. I'm gonna run the last 2 games here, but I don't think that it makes any sense to cut the Reliquary Tower, nor does it make much sense to cut the Thought Vessel, because they are just completely ridiculous cards when you get the most ridiculous card of them all. All right, so Falcon 776. And that happens a lot. You have tap to put Necropotence into play. So you really want, like, if Zur were any other commander, let's say Zur were Oloro, right? Or they print some new 4-mana commander that's just like Zur, but doesn't tap to put Necro in play. It attacks and it draws cards and gives you some mana or something. Sorry about that. I don't think, like, maybe I wouldn't run the Thought Vessels, because now I have to like use tutors to go get them, and I have to use a tutor to go get Necro, and it's too much. It's too much. Plus, I need to fetch counter magic, and that's just asking too much of the deck. It's because Zur taps to put Necro into play that those cards are worth playing, because you can just reserve your fetch or your vampiric or whatever for one of those cards as soon as you know that you're going to connect with Zur, and then that's it. You've those 2 cards put together is essentially lethal. Okay, so who is this? Next game though is on against Falcon 776, and Falcon has Yuriko, and he's going first, and leads off with an untapped Watery Grave, and I'm thinking, I don't know if that's a Stifle that they're holding up or a tutor or what, but no, maybe if I Pyrrhic. Oh, excuse me. I was so happy it didn't play a 1-drop. Well, it turns out it's Thieves Guild Enforcer from 2021. It mills your opponent, and it will get bigger and get Death Touch if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. But it's also a 1-mana flash creature that combos quite nicely with Yuriko, so I'm getting ninjutsu'd, and my opponent hits Ashiok. And actually, the problem for me, the real problem in this game, is actually going to be Ashiok. Look, not yet, but the expedition map isn't going to work. I was counting on that to get my mana going. Like, I do the right thing here and run out enough mana for Zur, but you're going to see it's going to get worse and worse. My opponent's next hit, he uses, instead of playing Ashiok here, which I think would have been correct, my opponent uses Limdol's Vault in response to Yuriko to do like a cutesy play that's completely pointless. I'll show you what it is. Obviously, you're going to see it here in just a second, but this is just silly because look what my opponent gets. Draco to dome me for 16, but so what? I'm still at 19. I mean, this is 16 feels great, right? Like, man, I hit him for 16. +1, 17 damage. Yeah, but it's not commander damage. And honestly, all that did was, now I'm playing a normal game of Magic where I start at 20 life. Like, big deal. It essentially did nothing because the control deck can still play at 20 life, just like control decks have since the beginning of Magic. So, not great. But my opponent just wasted a tutor on Draco, and now they've got a Draco in their hand. Now, if they can do it again, obviously, that's something. It still wouldn't kill me, but, after vampiric tutoring or something, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I'd be dead. So that is a threat, and you'll see. Oh, I'm so sorry. You'll see I'm going to play the game around that. But again, that's kind of asking a lot, like to try to Draco, get it back, Draco again. I don't think get it back on top of your library, To me, that just seems silly. Now, if my opponent had fetched up something that would still deal a lot of damage but was more useful, like more universally useful, for example, Treasure Cruise and Domi for 8 there, that's still a big hit, but it also gives them a card that they can use down the road. And it's still a good card. Draco, come on. But hey, that's the choice I make. I'm all right with it. So on my turn, I just play Zur. Might have been wrong to do, but I was hoping that would. So I was thinking I would play Zur, and then on their turn, if they played Ashiok, then they can't attack me and get through, so I can block. And while I can't search with Zur, at least I've shut off Yuriko. But they had an end of turn 1 mana bounce. They had a unsummon. So effect. So for exactly 1 blue, which is what they needed. So yuck. And my opponent reveals a counterspell here and then plays Scheming Symmetry. So I'm going to back up. This is really important. So they play Scheming Symmetry. So it's a Imperial Seal for 2 players. You pick one and they pick one. Ashiok says spells and abilities your opponent's control can't cause their controller to search. So Scheming Symmetry does not work like it would with a Notion, not a Notion Thief, but not Hull Breacher. Oh goodness, what is this thing called? There's a combo with it, but the combo is this guy, Opposition Agent. Opposition Agent says you control your opponents while they're searching. So Ashiok just says your opponent spells and abilities your opponent's control can't be done. So basically, this allowed me to search because this isn't a spell or ability that I control. It's one that my opponent controls. So I actually got to search my library. So I figured, okay, well, what they're trying to do is do like a gotcha. They're going to play this, and then I'm going to search my library for the perfect card, and then they're just going to minus Ashiok and put it and exile it, right? So it's like, I'm going to hedge my bets. I'll get a card that could be good, but at least, it might be good, but it's not too good. So if I lose it, I'm not too upset. In hindsight, the card I should have gotten was a land that produces white mana because I have multiples of those. And if my opponent, did minus, then I've lost a land. But the card I chose was Jeweled Lotus. Another decent option might have been Mox Opal. But the card I chose was Jeweled Lotus, and my thought was that I'm going to replay Zur here. It's uncounterable, and then I've got a blocker. And then if they have like some removal spell, well, then I can replay Zur again without necessarily, I didn't go get like my Mana Crypt or something that I'd still like to have in my deck. So, plus, I don't know, maybe Mana Crypt isn't that good against somebody trying to do massive Yuriko damage. But anyway, so I run out the Zur, and they run out Scroll Rack. Now, remember what I was saying about putting Draco on top? This is scary, but they attack and I just block. So I'm not taking 16 here, and they're not drawing an extra card here, but yuck. And I actually played the Jeweled Lotus only because they can't counter my commander with the Cavern of Souls, but they can counter the Lotus, so I want to get it down before they were untapping. So on my turn, I draw. Now look at this. Can't search. I need white, but I don't have any way to make white. This is where I should have gotten white. Like, if I could just Teferi this back and then start attacking Ashiok, I'd be so much better off, but I can't. So what I decided to do instead is, remember somebody was saying, don't play Jete? Well, thank goodness I'm playing Jete. Opponent flashes out the Thieves Guild thing and hits a Mox Opal and a Strip Mine, 2 cards I would have loved to draw. But anyway, I do get to kill their Thief, and they play an Arcane Signet, and I get to shrink their Yuriko. It doesn't say unblocked. The Ninjutsu does, but the card has to deal damage for it to proc. So opponent uses a Vampiric Tutor and a Scroll Rack combination to ninjutsu something into play here that lets them draw an extra card. It's when you damage someone, you draw a card. So they did get to draw an extra card there, but then I get to Teferi it back to their hand and attack, and I brainstorm for the turn and pass. I would have loved to have gotten. I wish this were the Mox Opal, but how was I supposed to know the opponent's not going to use the Ashiok? Anyway, all right, so I'm going to attack again. I'm of course attacking Ashiok here, and I finally remove a counter from Jitte so that I can kill the Ashiok, and then plus Teferi, and during my opponent's draw step, after they've drawn their card, I take their hand away. I use 3 counters on Jitte to shrink all of their creatures so that my opponent gets no cards at all for the turn, effectively time walking my opponent. I can now search again. Yay, all the handcuffs are off. And of course now I can fragmentize their Scroll Rack, plus up to Fairy, and play and use an Expedition map, wasteland them, and attack with Zur. Once again, Jitte owning the board. So now I'm going to go ahead and just exile their guy with a Detention Sphere here and pass. Jitte has 2 counters. I have a counter spell and a Teferi active. My opponent has no cards in hand and is hurting for mana too. That Mox Opal doesn't do anything over there. They just have this Signet as their only white source. So, all right, so I'm going to plus Teferi again, swing in, and fetch. This time I get Rip. And the reason I got Rest in Peace over Necro, I'm at 13. I don't think that my opponent's going to win the game here. But if I get Rest in Peace, my next card could be Energy Field, and then I don't have to waste counters on the Jitte here. But there's also the chance that I could just find a way to win the game because I have Rest in Peace in play now. This is a Rest in Peace based deck, actually, and lo and behold, boom, there's a Fabricate, and I just win the game. So we'll go get Helm under the protection of Teferi. There's no question about what's happening here. If not, I probably would have gotten, because of the way this game was going and what my opponent's trying to do, I probably would have gotten Energy Field here. And then with Energy Field into play, I don't know. I may have gotten Energy Field. I may have considered getting Seal of Cleansing also and just kill the Arcane Signet and kill this. Did I say my opponent doesn't have white? I guess I was thinking that they were playing the same colors as me. They actually aren't playing white, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, most likely I would have just gone for Energy Field in order to make it so that Yuriko pretty much, like, they'd have to have a Boomerang for Rest in Peace or Energy Field in order to even for this commander to even be relevant at that point. It has to deal damage. I actually thought about getting it on the Rest in Peace turn. I thought about Necro, and then I went with the route that I took. But any of the 3 cards actually would have been pretty reasonable. I didn't get Energy Field ultimately because I knew that I could hold off Yuriko with the Jitte, and I didn't want to have to counterspell and kill my Energy Field prematurely. So another reason to get ripped there. But worked out nicely. All right, so that was a pretty good game there. And then I had one more game, and I think it's even better if I remember right. It's this one against Master of Nature. Yeah, this one's even better. This one's kind of stupid. It was kind of irksome, but not irksome and quirky here, as you'll see. Pretty ridiculous. So we've had some interesting games. I've been smashed for 16 off of Yuriko, and I've had to Mulligan to 3. What's going to happen in this game? Well, I'm playing against Derevi. I am going first. I have a functional hand, right? And I'm going to put myself a Mana Vault on top, and I've got a really good... I'm going to come roaring out the gates here. I saw it. Except my opponent's... Root base, what? Okay. So artifacts and lands enter the battlefield tapped. So on my second turn, I play a tapped Tundra and a tapped Mana Vault. So why do I play a tapped Mana Vault? Because on top of my deck is a Mox Opal, which will come into play tapped. So you have to be thinking now 2 turns ahead instead of 1. So I played this because I needed to use the mana there, and then on the next turn I play a tap land, cast a Thought Vessel on exactly 2, and play a tapped Opal. And then on the next turn I can finally use my artifacts. Not this one, but you know. Anyway, my opponent, on the other hand, gets to play a Selesnya Sanctuary, so they get to play a tapped land that has value attached to the tap, and then runs out a Winter Orb. Now, of course, Winter Orb is tapped when it comes into play, and a tapped Strip Mine. So they're delayed, which gives me time to run out Zura, and I thought about how I want to handle this. I thought about tutoring for and in hindsight, I should have, but I was thinking I could tutor for so the Mire, of course, comes into play tapped. Then the land you search with it comes into play tapped, and of course that's if you can untap it under the orb. So basically, fetch lands are dead. So I thought about, but I played it only because there's some chance that the game goes that long. Plus, I can untap it if my opponent doesn't use their strip mine, and then kind of like they don't really have a good target, even though I would have to use it to get a tapped land, so it's not that sexy anyway. But anyway, so what I thought about doing here was tutoring for a fabricating for a diamond, Mox Diamond, pitching the other fetch land, putting into play tapped, and sitting on a counterspell. And in hindsight, that's what I should have done. But I don't, and my opponent plows. And natural slates. Card I didn't realize. I think I've seen this before and completely forgot about it. So I like Nature's Claim and I like Crumble. And now there's Natural Slate as well. So probably play all 3 of them if you're playing green, because killing turn 1 Soul Ring is that good. But yuck. Okay, so Plow and Natural Slate's my Mox Opal. Thankfully, I guess I could have targeted the Vessel, but then it's probably a lot of risk leaving a colored mana source like that. So um, and of course, they have to play a land tapped, and I just untap and can't do a heck of a lot, but I can sit on a counterspell. So I decide instead, though, I'm going to go ahead and do the diamond play that I thought of earlier, because remember, comes into play tapped, so I have to kind of like do everything at the wrong time here, play a tapped expedition map and so forth. All right, so now my opponent's got 4 mana and could sneak Derevi into play, but they go for like a really greedy Moan Valley Acid Moss. I totally let that go and just tied some more lands into my hand. My opponent just tapped themselves down into their own Winter Orb. So for my turn, I search for a Wasteland, and hold on, this game is, I'm running too fast. So on my turn, I use my map to search for a Wasteland, and of course I have to put it into play tapped, which means that when my opponent taps their Sanctuary, I can't waste it. They play another land tapped and then cast Seal of Primordium off of the Sanctuary. I don't know how many disenchants that is. It felt like more than it is, I guess, because it felt like this was disenchanted by Root Maze. But they play Seal of Primordium and kill my freaking Mox Diamond. So once again, I'm running through all my good stuff here and struggling. But if you've noticed, there's a problem over here. I don't know if you've seen the problem, but it's real obvious to me. Where the heck are my opponent's creatures? They've got nothing but disenchants and disruption, but no creatures. So how are they playing under this Winter Orb? Putting in when they're under like their own Kismet as well. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Now they did untap Trop, but I'm sandbagging Wasteland for this. Now if they untap this, you would think, well, that's not good because they can play a 4th land, and then they can use the commander's ability to put it into play, the 4 mana activation cost. But they can't, because if they untap this, I'm going to waste it, and there's no opportunity because their 4th land would come into play tapped anyway. So even if they like untap a second land or whatever, they have to untap a 3rd land, then I'm going to take it out. Like it'd be really difficult for them to pull that off. So I'm just going to maintain my discipline, and I'm not going to take the bait with these other lands. I'm just going to sit on my Wasteland here. Let's see if we can skip ahead. I hope I didn't break it by pausing it. So I play a Hollowed Fountain, and I don't pay 2 life here, obviously. What's going on? Oh no, don't tell me I broke it. By playing Arcane Signet, I cast an Arcane Signet. It comes into play tapped. It brings my counterspell shields down a bit, but I figure it's okay because I need the mana. Well, I guess we're gonna have to run through it the rest of the way. And opponent does untap their Sanctuary, and I take it out right away. And basically, what ends up happening is I just slowly build up I draw more of my artifact mana. I mean, this is a Winter Orb deck, and I get enough artifact mana into play that I get 6 mana. And I draw at some point, I end up counterspelling something that was a big threat, and I can't remember what it was. But I end up drawing Force of Negation, but no blue card. I get Cavern of Souls into play, and I untap it and everything. And my opponent plays, I think, 1 or 2 more disenchants, and like just keeps disenchanting artifact mana. I just keep hitting him with more artifact mana and making land drops thanks to the Tithe earlier. And finally, what ends up going down is that I get 6 mana and I finally draw another blue card. So I just tap out for an uncounterable Zur. My opponent draws, looks at the Zur, looks at their hand, scoops it up. I mean, I've got a Thought Vessel in play at that point. I've taken a bunch of damage off the Mana Vault. By then, I'm down to like 30 or 27, somewhere in that range. But it doesn't matter. Of course, you don't have a draw step, so Mana Vault's pain will not trigger any further because it's at the beginning of your upkeep. If you don't, at the beginning of your draw step, it deals damage to you. So once you get the Necro out, it stops damaging you. So, my opponent knew that I was going to swing in for and draw like 20, and they couldn't do anything about it, so they gave up. But yeah, super interesting game. I'm sorry the replay bugged out. It's really disappointing, but my opponent quitting in the middle of it was mainly the reason. Although I'm going to try one more time just in case pausing was the problem, and hopefully, I apologize if this doesn't end up getting us anywhere at the end of this video. So if you're not interested in seeing if this works out, totally understandable. And honestly, that's pretty much the closer. I'm going to bring the deck list up afterwards, but other than that, those are all the games I had. So hopefully you enjoyed them, and if you do end it here, I want to say thanks for watching, and if not, we'll see in a moment whether or not I just don't need to pause it. We can actually get the rest of the game. So yeah, tapped Winter Orb, not really a combo. Like, here's the thing: my opponent does seem to be playing a Root Maze deck, but not a Winter Orb deck, or maybe a Winter Orb deck, but not a Root Maze. I don't know. I kind of like what they're doing over there, but where are their creatures? You need a way to cheat the orb. Oh yeah, that's what it was. I did burn a counterspell because my opponent played a null rod effect. A null rod effect. And that's what I ended up having to actually hard counter. So here I just float mana and Tithe. Come on, don't break. Let's see. This it's gonna work. Yeah, they seal my diamond. Maybe we'll get to see the rest of the game. I hope so, because I mean this was a hell of a game. Yeah, okay. Don't bug on the fountain. Oh, we're bugging on the fountain. That's disappointing. Well, anyway, yeah, so that's what it was. So I did have, this came into play tapped. I played a tapped Arcane Signet. I stripped the thing. They untapped a land. Oh, they untapped the Sanctuary, so I stripped that. They play a land tapped. So then on my turn, I actually get to untap my Hallowed Fountain. And then my Arcane Signet is up also. And my opponent plays the 2 mana green creature. Do they play the green creature or Null Rod? It's one of the two, right? It shuts off artifacts, and so I hard counter it. Hold and that on that turn I actually had drawn the I drew the 1 blue counterspell, the Force of Negation. So I hard counter it with the actual regular counterspell. But yeah, so this opponent's deck was just a billion disenchants. It was, disenchant, disenchant, removal, 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 stacks, some kind of stacks or prison deck. But they never really got their Derevi going, and without the Derevi, like to cheat around all this stuff, I guess that's their plan. Why they're not running creatures is just that the Derevi will untap their lands for them. But it seems fairly mediocre to me. And in this game, it just didn't work out for them. And good guys win, or maybe, depending on your perspective, the bad guys won. But either way, it was us. So anyway, that's all I've got. Hopefully you enjoyed watching the Zur deck. Apologize, I'm having a little bit of a sort of end of year crud here. Don't think it's the big virus everybody seems to be afraid of, but I think it's just a typical end of year cough. But it does make recording a little bit tough. Anyway, but I thought it was too enjoyable and that you would appreciate watching them. So hopefully you did. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.